Shadow of a Doubt is a 1943 thriller by Alfred Hitchcock. And today on the Golden Hour Film Podcast, we're going to talk about why it's considered one of his best and most important films from the 1940s, and indeed his entire filmography. Hello and welcome to the Golden Hour Film Podcast. I'm your co-host Shane Mulvaney, and I'm with my other co-host Harry Bailey. Harry, how are you today?
A little under the weather, Shane. Shane's gonna kind of carry the boats with this episode, because I'm aware that my voice is not very attractive this week. So I'm gonna do as little talking as possible for a podcast, whilst also trying to, carry my weight.
Yeah, no, if anyone's listened to any of our previous episodes and they're a bit taken aback as to me opening the episode and Harry's taking a step back, that's why. So I'll try and do as good a job as Harry did in the first few episodes. I can't promise anything, but we'll see how we get on. So yeah, this is a Shadow of a Doubt. It's a 1943 thriller by Alfred Hitchcock, and it was written by Thornton Wilder. The cast, it stars Joseph Cotton as Charlie Oakley, Teresa Wright as Charlie Oakley, his niece, and a couple of other Hitchcock character actors such as Patricia Collins and Henry Travers. So yeah, we're going to talk about what's your opening thoughts, Harry, about this kind of film.
Well, the first time I watched it was probably less than a year ago. I think I watched it for the first time last summer, and the first time I watched it, I thought it was absolutely amazing. Without spoiling anything, I feel like Hitchcock really got his dark side on show here. Maybe not for the first time in his filmography, but it's one of the first great examples. The work he did with Thornton Wilder is very clear. I know Hitchcock said his reasoning for everyone seems to call this Hitchcock's favorite Hitchcock film. I don't think that's true. Hitchcock's always denied it, but Hitchcock denies everything. But the work he did with Thornton Wilder, he said, is one of his fondest memories, I think, of his whole career. It's the first and only time they collaborated, but I think with Thornton Wilder, he found a guy who's a bit like-minded to him. A couple of stories with Thornton Wilder, one I'll tell later on in the pod, but just for context, Hitchcock does his thrillers and stuff. After this film, Thornton Wilder then got enlisted in the psychological warfare section of the U.S. Army. So the guy knows how to get in people's heads, and he does it pretty well in writing this film.
Yeah, a bit of background on this film. So the film's idea originated from a guy called Gordon MacDonald, who was the husband of someone who worked in Hitchcock's story department. And he basically wanted to do a story about a real guy named Earl Leonard Nelson, who was a mass murderer in the 1920s known as the Gorilla Man. So he was basically wanted to make a dramatized version inspired by this. It's obviously in the film, he has a different name, he goes by a different kind of nickname, if you want to call it that as well. But essentially, that's the massive inspiration behind the film.
Cool.
So unlike The Wrong Man from the 1950s, which is out and out a dramatization of real events, this is more a story kind of inspired heavily by that real case, but they just changed the names and they changed his nickname and they changed a few other details for the kind of the cinematic purposes, really. So yeah, apparently, as Harry just touched on there a second ago, Hitchcock apparently said that this was his favourite film that he directed. That it has been up for dispute down the years, as Harry just said. So going into the cast, so as we mentioned before, Joseph Cotton plays the main character of Charles Oakley, and he's probably best known up to this point for Citizen Kane. It's fair to say. He would go on to be in The Third Man, which is again one of the best films in the 1940s. Teresa Wright was Charlie Newton, and apparently she came on board without any kind of Hitchcock talked to her about the film, and she just jumped at the chance straight away. She didn't have to read a script. She didn't have to get persuaded by him. As soon as she heard the story and what it would entail and what her character was, she just jumped on board straight away. And her performance is probably the backbone of the entire film, because it kind of tracks how would you react if a family member that you kind of idolise, you look up to, that you think is such a great person, turns out that this person maybe isn't everything you thought he was or she was. I did want to mention the cinematographer as well. So it's shot by Joseph Valentine. I think a lot of times in Hitchcock films we tend to, when we talk about how good it looks and the cinematography, we kind of tend to give Hitchcock the lion's share of credit, which is kind of understandable because a lot of his films share the same DNA in terms of how they're shot and how they look. But yeah, you don't do this stuff alone, I don't think. So Joseph Valentine, shout out to him because it does look really good, and typical Hitchcock usage of shadows and foreboding kind of. There's a couple of really good like drone aerial shots, especially early on in the film, that like the way he just pans. Yeah, it's some good stuff here from Joseph Valentine. If you can leave a 5-star review or a good review and good comments, because it really does help to push us up in the YouTube algorithms and the Spotify algorithms, and it just really does help when you're trying to launch a new podcast like this to get as many ears and eyeballs on it as possible. So, and before we get into the crux of the film, in terms of a scene-by-scene breakdown, as we tend to do here in the Golden Hour Film Podcast, I just wanted to talk about the title as well, because the title, apparently it was just a working title at the start, Shadow of a Doubt. They weren't entirely sure what they were going to call the film, but it eventually ended up sticking. So I just wanted to get your quick thoughts, Harry, about that, because it's a cool title, but it probably doesn't mean that much out of context. So what do you think about the title?
Yeah, I mean, I know in a lot of the countries that were airing it outside the US, they took the title quite literally in the posters. In Italy and in France and wherever was like a big ominous shadow.
Yeah.
Which, like, Hitchcock loves his shadows and all, don't get me wrong, but this isn't one of those examples of like a heavily drenched film in shadow. So it's just kind of a funny one that this was the one that he called Shadow of a Doubt.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic, if anything, that he doesn't really use shadows that much in comparison to some
No.
of the other films. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about the title. I think you could probably point out like 5 other Hitchcock films that could have been called Shadow of a Doubt where it makes more sense than this.
Yeah, I suppose it does have the shadow, as you mentioned. Shadow is like a big thing in Hitchcock films. A little bit less so in this film, but there are a few instances populated here and there. The big one is probably Dow. Like she begins to doubt her uncle's intentions, her uncle's, for want of a better word, his humanity really. So yeah, it's probably a little bit on the nose, but also it's obscure and it's not like obvious enough that it's a great title. But also it's a cool title. Like I think there's a couple of films from the 1950s which I've seen just because of their title. There's one called Appointment with Danger, which isn't really that good, but a film called Appointment with Danger, I'm not watching that film. I'm going to watch that film.
Yeah.
No matter what. Doesn't matter how good it is. Shadow of a Doubt's another one where I was going to watch it a few months ago. Eventually ended up deciding on something else. But the reason I was going to watch it is because, well, aside from the fact that it has a good reputation, the title is really like just it grabs you instantly. Like you want to find out what the hell this thing's about. So anyway, rambling aside, let's start into the crux of the film. And the film opens with a scene of people dancing in the credits. So basically, just a few establishing shots. Initially, we're in Philadelphia. So the bulk of the film is in a place called Santa Rosa in California, but we don't get there for a little while. So we start off in Philadelphia and we see Charles Oakley, Uncle Charlie as he'd gone to be known, just lying on a bed looking kind of, he's deep in thought, let's put it that way, he's deep in thought. His housekeeper comes in and she actually refers to him as Mr. Spencer, which it will become clear that that's not his name, so clearly this dude's into, he's doesn't want people to know his real name for whatever reason. We don't know that yet. She tells him that 2 guys have knocked on his door, inquiring as to where he is, and she says that he's not in at the moment, but he'll be back. So she tells him that they say that not to mention this conversation, which immediately kind of grabs his interest, and he's a bit unsure of himself. So she picks up a load of, like, there's just money lying everywhere really. There's money on the dressing table, there's money on the floor. So clearly this is a dude who isn't lacking for financial gain, let's put it that way. But as soon as she leaves the room, then he springs into action because he wants to know why the hell these guys want to follow him. So he takes a drink. We see some ominous music plays. That's Hitchcock's way. Obviously, I'm letting us know something's about to go down here. And he just throws the glass against the wall. For whatever reason, this is startled him, and it's just knocked him for six, really. So he takes his cash and his hat, and he looks out the window. He sees the two guys across the street, so he's wondering about what the hell to do. But yeah, he takes his hat and his cash, and he leaves, and he sees the two guys across the street. And as subtly as he can, he just kind of walks past them. But one of the guys turns around, realizes that this is probably the guy that they're looking for, so they start to follow him, so they start to go in pursuit. And then, yeah, it's a couple of really cool shots then. So the two guys split up, they try and go in pursuit of Charles, but then there's a really cool shot where they end up running into each other. So for whatever reason, however he manages to do it, he's evaded them. And then the camera pans up. It's an overhead shot looking down that we see on these guys, and then it pans up, and Charles is just casually smoking a cigar, and he just struts off. So for the moment, at least, he's managed to evade justice in whatever form that takes, or at least he's managed to evade whatever reason these guys are looking for him. So yeah, this is how we establish the fact that Charles Oakley is in a bit of trouble. There's people after him. And for whatever reason, we don't know that yet, but there's people after him, and he basically needs to get the hell out of town because he doesn't want them finding him, really. So he ends up going to the post office, and he leaves a message for Mrs. Newton. He tells her that he's coming to stay and not to stop him, and that he's going to arrive on Thursday. So
two things. One, in this telegram, it's actually addressed to Joseph Newton, which is why it's a surprise to the mother. It's addressed to Joseph, who's actually his brother-in-law, because we will find out later in the film that our boy, Mr. Spencer, aka Uncle Charlie, is a big raging sexist who hates women. But also, he name drops his niece, Charlie, which I just thought was odd because he has 3 nephews and nieces, but he only name drops one of them. So there's a clear sign of favoritism here on his end, that he's only sending his regards to one of his nieces. So instantly we know that Uncle Charlie is a fan of Little Charlie, and we don't know it yet, but the fact that he's addressed it to Joseph, I think, is just a subtle thing, that even though he's not even related to Joseph is his brother-in-law, he would be more inclined to send a telegraph to Joseph, even though throughout the film they're not in any way close, just because he's the man of the house.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. I didn't spot that, but yeah. And that's something that would pop up actually throughout the film, is that these little moments of disdain, really.
Raging sexism. He hates the women.
Absolutely. So yeah, we know that he's planning on going to visit them on Thursday. So the next scene is actually a pretty funny scene. It starts off the young girl, Anna. It's Anne, isn't it?
Anne, I think, yeah.
Anne, yeah. So Anne picks up a phone about a telegram being left. She doesn't know what the hell, so she basically just fobs them off because she doesn't have a pencil lying around. It's funnier than I'm making out, but yeah, it's a funny scene, I think. But then her dad, Joseph, who Harry just mentioned there, her dad is trying to inquire what the hell is going on, but he's asking where Charlie is. She tells him that she's upstairs, or that she's not there anyway. So he goes upstairs and he's talking to Charlie, and Charlie's just down in the dumps. She's in the doldrums for whatever reason. She's just not having a good time of it at the moment. So she basically just is hopeless about everything at the moment. She says that the family has gone to hell, and what's the point in her mother going to work for hours on end and coming back and barely having time to do anything. A bit of an early kind of indication of Charlie's, maybe Charlie's anti-capitalist. That's the way I
I saw that as well.
Maybe a more progressive kind of person than would have existed at the time. That's the kind of thing that you probably see a lot now in modern films and films being made today, but not something you'd always see back in the day. So something worth mentioning.
Also, Joseph, the father, is Clarence from It's a Wonderful Life.
The angel, didn't we notice that?
Yeah.
I've only seen It's a Wonderful Life once.
The eyebrows. The eyebrows are the giveaway.
Yeah, the eyebrows, I've only seen It's a Wonderful Life once, so people are going to probably shout me in the comments for that. Go ahead, I deserve it. But yeah.
Wait till they hear what you rated it.
Well, I can see it going up. We've had this debate before, but I can
Yeah,
see
yeah,
it
yeah.
going
We'll
up.
talk
Yeah,
about that when we
yeah.
talk about It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure we'll get to It's a Wonderful Life at some point in
Yeah.
this span of this podcast. But yeah, so downstairs, Mrs. Newton arrives, and Charlie grabs a coat and says she runs downstairs and says that she's going to leave a message asking Uncle Charlie to come stay. But it turns out the family very soon, hear once Charlie left that he's actually already told them that he's coming to stay. And once young Charlie finds this out, she's convinced at the post office, she's just absolutely over the moon to hear this information. She's convinced that it's because of their kind of, she calls them twins, even though obviously they're uncle and aunt, but basically she thinks that because she was named after Charlie, or Charles, that they share this kind of deep connection.
There's a funny one-liner in the post office where she asks the clerk, "Do you believe in telepathy?" And she says, "I don't know what you're talking about. I only send telegrams the normal way." It was a pretty good one-liner. Probably the funniest thing in the film. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of moments that I laughed at, but it's definitely because, as I said earlier, it's based on a real case, and obviously there were real victims.
Yeah,
Kind of
Hitchcock
there were
actually.
real victims. He doesn't want to overdo it. Really.
Yeah, he brought in a second writer to add moments of comedy into it because he didn't want it to just be one big psychological depression session. So, yeah, that's probably the most notable moment of comedy. From here on in, it's just psychological warfare.
Yeah, Mrs. Newton mentions the fact that Charlie's the youngest of her siblings. And she has a funny line as well where she says, "You know, families always spoil the youngest." And then there's just a quick cut to the youngest boy who's just looking deeply unimpressed because that's clearly not his experience at all. But anyway, yeah, at the post office, Charlie learns about this. And then we then cut to a scene where Uncle Charlie is arriving on the train. And he comes in from the train. The family's just anticipating his arrival. But there's a moment of Hitchcock foreshadowing here, which is really interesting because, like, he mentions the fact that there's a lot of like black smoke billowing from the engine. He says that the reason for this was that he wanted like an imminent early sign of like imminent evil arriving in the town.
Oh, cool.
And one of his reasons for doing the film is because he wanted he wanted to investigate how a small, idyllic, normal kind of town would react to such a malcontent, really, or such a dark presence, really, if you want to call it that, invading the town. It's something that would go on to be investigating the likes of Night of the Hunter and even a couple of other Hitchcock films. But,
Great film.
Such a good film. Anyone who hasn't seen Night of the Hunter, you really have to watch Night of the Hunter. So it's kind of a similar thing that they're dealing with there. But yeah, that's the reason why this black smoke is billowing from the train. And yeah, it's, like I said, a moment of Hitchcock foreshadowing.
And so, on the train as well, Uncle Charlie spends the whole time hidden because he doesn't want anyone to recognize him, because it's in the papers now. Whatever it is, we don't know yet, is in the papers now, so he's hiding. And there's actually, whenever he says he's sick and he doesn't want to come out, there's a doctor on board. It's pretty funny because the doctor is playing cards, and I think the doctor is the same guy who was the blind guy in Saboteur. I think this is Mr. Martin from Saboteur, by the way.
I wasn't even paying. I didn't actually clock that, but you're probably right.
Pretty sure
Hitchcock does tend to use.
Yeah, I think it's the same guy.
Yeah, he does tend to use people, like reuse a lot of actors in these kind of roles. So yeah, could be right. Sure.
But the doctor has no interest in leaving the card game to go and suss him out because he has every single ace in his hand. Or sorry, every single spade. He has all the spades. My apologies.
Yeah, so Uncle Charlie manages to evade capture at the train. And he gets off the train and he's pretending still to be ill, and he's walking really, like, he's looking like he's really frail. But as soon as he sees the family, it's like that Kaiser Soze moment in Usual Suspects where he just instantly switches. Mm-hmm. And he basically struts over to the family and they all embrace, and everyone's happy that Uncle Charlie is finally here. And yeah, everything's looking up. So we pull up to the house and Charlie finally reunites with Charles, I should say. Finally reunites with his sister who he hasn't seen in a long, long time. That's probably going to be a problem here, by the way. I'll be referencing Charlie and Charles. So they pull up to the house and Uncle Charlie finally reunites with his sister who he hasn't seen in a long, long time, and they're both just over the moon to see each other. As she says, he's the baby of the family, so she hasn't seen him in a while since he left. So in the next scene, Uncle Charlie, it turns out, was after being given Charlie's room to stay in. So it was another moment of Hitchcock foreshadowing, where he puts his bag down and he's about to put his hat on the bed, but Joseph, his brother-in-law, says no, basically telling him that you don't want to believe in bad luck, because apparently it's a sign of bad luck for someone to put their hat on the bed. I haven't heard this before, but maybe other people do. But that's another Hitchcock moment where he wanted to get across the idea that this guy doesn't really care about bad luck. He is the bad luck, so he wouldn't give a crap about that stuff, putting his hat on the bed. But Uncle Charles pretends then to be, oh yeah, you're right. So he takes the hat off the bed. But once Joseph leaves the room, he just throws his hat on the bed anyway. So again, another sign that he's a malevolent presence, and that's Hitchcock's intention, at least, to show that he's a malevolent presence and that bad things are in store really for the family.
So actually, at the house that they're in, the Newtons, aren't they? Is that their name?
The Newtons, yeah.
Yeah, the Newtons' house was a house that Thornton Wilder and Alfred Hitchcock went scouting for, and they found this house, but they thought it was too big for a bank clerk. So when they were ready to give up on the house, they actually found out that the guy who owned the house was, I don't think he was a bank clerk, but he basically was the same pay level as a bank clerk. So they were like, okay, fair enough. And they were all ready to shoot and film in this house, and they came back to the house, and because the guy's house was going to be in a movie, he got the whole house done up, painted the whole house and everything. Hitchcock wasn't impressed, because now it looked way too lavish for a bank clerk. So they, with the guy's permission, just covered the house in dirt again. They completely ruined the paint job. They painted dirt on the sides of the house and stuff to make it look less impressive.
So at dinner that night, Charlie, or Uncle Charles, I should say, we already know at this point that he's quite wealthy. He's quite well to do. But the family wouldn't necessarily have known that. But if they didn't know it then, they certainly know now, because he just starts handing out a load of lavish gifts to the whole family. So he gives a wristwatch to Joseph, his brother-in-law, who says that he'd never had a wristwatch before and he's looking forward to showing it off at work. Yeah. He gives clothes and stuff to the young kids, and I don't actually know the name of the little boy using it, but you know that. Roger. I think it's Roger.
I think you're right.
So he gives he gives clothes and stuff to little Anne and little Roger. He gives a shawl to his sister Emma, but he leaves the most impressive gift to little Charlie, his niece. Initially, it's pretty funny, because she actually tries to she doesn't want the gifts, and she doesn't want to accept it. Mm-hmm. And there's a funny line where Anne says, the ones who said they don't want anything always get more in the end. That's what she's hoping for. So it's I can identify with that kind of bickering between siblings there. But yeah, Charlie says that she doesn't want any gifts, but Uncle Charles then eventually manages to slip a ring on her finger, and it turns out to be this really expensive emerald ring. And she's just over the moon with this. She says that she just has a feeling that they're basically the same, and she actually comes out with the line, I have a feeling that inside you somewhere there's something nobody knows about. She means this in a good way, but you can just see his kind of expression start to turn. So we know at this point that he's hiding something, and as soon as she says that, it's kind of reinforced for the audience. So again, more Hitchcock foreshadowing, probably the third or fourth time, but he's a master of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, she's a pretty clever character, is little Charlie. She seems to deduce things very quickly. She's meant to be a very intelligent character. And also as well, on this ring that Uncle Charlie gives her, she notices that there's an inscription on it that's kind of faded. Yeah. And he tries to play it off as if the jeweler scammed him. It was a TS from BM, whoever they are. I can tell you that there was no C's there, so it's clearly not from Charlie to Charlie. But she says, oh, it's great. I'm sure whoever had this before loved it. And he was like, I'm going to get that removed. And she was like, no, I want the authentic ring. So she keeps it that way. Yeah. Foreshadowing.
Yeah. Foreshadowing, absolutely. So Charlie then says that he's going to open an account in Mr. Newton's bank, his brother-in-law Joseph. And he says that he's going to deposit 30 or 40 grand, and he says this like really casually, as if everyone has 30 or 40 grand that they just happen to
Especially in the
40 grand
40s.
in a new bank account.
Especially in the
Back
1940s.
then, that was back then, absolutely, that was a massive, massive chunk of change. So Joseph can't really believe his ears when he hears this, but of course, he's not going to say no. He might be wondering where the hell he can get that kind of money from, but he's not going to say no, because at the end of the day, he's going to be bringing a lot of money into his bank. So his employers ain't going to be too upset with him, I'm sure. Yeah, and then we cut to like a scene of a waltz kind of thing. So for whatever reason, it was a bit strange to me. I don't really know where it came from. They seemed to be some sort of ball or
the waltz is...
It was at the start of the film.
Yeah, it was at the start. It was during the credits. Is to the tune of a waltz called "The Merry Widow."
Ah, okay.
Oh,
I was wondering why.
I didn't know that before either. And then when I read it, I was like, oh, right, okay. So yeah, that will make sense. I know, like, we're saying that. If you've not seen the film, you're like, that's fucking no information. Yeah. No, that will make sense. Just wait.
That went completely over my head. That went, because there's a scene then shortly after, I can talk about now, where she's little Charlie's trying to remember the name of the waltz, and he's Uncle Charlie is basically trying to throw off the scent. He's
giving her wrong answers and stuff.
So he's giving her that completely went over my head.
And then when she goes, and then when she goes, oh, it's the Merry he knocks his glass over and distracts everyone. Maybe that was common knowledge in the 40s. Maybe the Merry Widow waltz was common knowledge. I don't know.
Well, it makes sense. Well, we might as well say now, we're about to learn that the name of the killer, there's a killer on the loose, and he goes by the name, the Merry Widow Murderer. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a bit of foreshadowing. So, but yeah, Uncle Charlie, always wondering why at the time he deliberately knocks a glass over when he's in this kind of debate with Charlie about what the hell the name of the song is. That's why. So Harry clicked that up for us.
So obviously, whoever this Merry Widow Murderer is obviously humming this tune whilst they're murdering people. How people know that, I don't know, because surely anyone who could hear them humming this are like dead. But don't read into it too much.
Yeah, it's all about the vibes. Really,
yeah.
And then there's a funny scene. We get introduced to Herbie, who's played by Hume Cronin, who's a friend of Uncle Joseph. Not Uncle Joseph, he's actually Joseph, the father. Yeah. But he's Uncle Charlie's brother-in-law. He said that about Sherlock Holmes versus Poirot. I'm not going to try and pronounce Poirot's first name because I can never get it right.
Hercule.
So, Hercule, that's it. Hercule Poirot. So, do my best Kenneth Branagh impression there, that's really bad. But these two guys are clearly there's a lot of true crime aficionados nowadays. These guys are the equivalent of that back in the day, really. They love their true crime and they love their fictional crime as well.
But particularly, they are obsessed about the perfect murder, which is Alfred Hitchcock's bag. That man would run himself a bath thinking about the perfect murder and how he could kill himself. I'm just sure of it. Or how he could kill someone else. That man is constantly trying to figure out, across his entire life, that man was trying to figure out the perfect murder. So much so that he references it in about 20 different films.
Yeah. We see it in Suspicion from, anyone has seen the episode from a few weeks ago. We see it in Dial M for Murder. It's probably the most obvious example in this filmography where...
Rope as well.
One of the characters. Rope as well. Yeah, Rope actually. Even
Rope,
more so.
They literally go out of their way to try and commit the perfect murder.
The perfect murder, yeah. Dial M for Murder, Rope. I mean, he's obsessed with it in his filmography, but hey, they come with fucking fantastic results, so...
Yeah.
Who are we to stop Hitchcock from his wanderings about trying to pull off the perfect murder? Yeah, so Herbie says that he'd make it so that it wouldn't look like murder. Joseph says that a blunt instrument would be the best way, which I'm not 100% sure about. I mean, fingerprints.
I think they come to the conclusion that that's actually a terrible suggestion after he says it.
Yeah, and Herbie, like I said, says that he'd try and make it so that it wouldn't look like murder, which is probably coming back to the Suspicion, which we talked about a few weeks ago, the poison of it all. So, yeah, Hitchcock is grappling with these questions throughout his filmography. And
Shane, if you could kill someone, how would you do it? What's your perfect murder?
believe it or not, Harry, I haven't thought about it
We
before.
may as well get this out of the way. I would say, see, most people nowadays just say, "Oh, I try and do it in a way where I get out of it in the courts," like O.J. Simpson,
Yeah.
drop a glove that doesn't fit your hand at the murder scene. Not that O.J. Simpson did it. O.J. Simpson did it. So a lot of people go that route. Also, there's the classic, make an icicle and stab them with the icicle, and then the icicle melts, so then there's no evidence. That's my favorite. I like that one a lot.
I'd probably go Breaking Bad is one of my favorite TV shows of all time, and I'd probably do a little homage to Walt where I'd like stick some like ricin in someone's like birthday cake or something. You know what I mean? That way I wouldn't be traced back to me, but who knows? Yeah. To be honest, it's not a question of unlike Hitchcock, it's not a question I've really grappled with my entire life. So, but who knows? Who knows what the future holds? Coming back to Shadow of a Doubt, Uncle Charlie's reading a newspaper, and he sees something that takes him aback, and he then calls Anne over, or Anne starts to come over to him. So I'm not sure which order it comes in, but basically he then subtly pretends to try and make like little paper houses with the newspaper. So he's tearing off pages, and he's pretending to like build
a barn.
Build like paper houses. Yeah, build a barn or build a house with this. But then he starts to like slowly then stash the newspaper article in his pocket. So there's something on there that he doesn't want people to see. And little Charlie, his niece, is wondering why the hell he's doing this. But then as soon as she finds out, she doesn't really ask him too many questions once he pretends that it's just an accident. Oh, I didn't mean to do that, sorry.
Yeah.
She doesn't really ask him too many questions. So at this point in the film, she's not too inquisitive of Uncle Charlie. But we're getting there.
Yeah, she does realise after the barn has been built that pages 3 and 4 are missing. And then when she goes up to his room, she finds them in his coat pocket. So again, although she's not like outwardly accusing her uncle of being a serial killer, she is still intelligent enough to deduce him, to make it out like he's not this clever man who's above all women and he can outthink all the women in the world. His little niece keeps finding out all of these things that he's doing, but because she just believes in his character and believes in his goodwill, she's, not accusing him of being a murderer, but she does keep catching him.
Yeah, and it comes back to that like theme of earlier that she believes there's some sort of telepathic understanding between them. So she's the only one really initially to spot the fact that there's like something wrong with this guy. But she doesn't really know what. Not necessarily something wrong, but that he's hiding something more so. She probably at this point thinks it's something fairly innocent, just something maybe embarrassing that he doesn't want to share with the family. She doesn't know that it's a deep dark secret. But yeah, because of the newspaper article and because of a couple of other moments, she knows that there's something that he's hiding. She doesn't know what yet, but she knows there's something that he's hiding. So, what did you also make, Harry, about there's a weird undertone throughout their early interactions, especially.
She wants to fuck her uncle.
That's what it is. I mean, I didn't want to say it like
she
so
wants to fuck her uncle.
It's so weird. I mean, like they're two good performances. Like Theresa Wright's really good in the role, but with what they're given, they perform great. But
she also wants to fuck her uncle. Yes.
It's so weird. Yeah. It's such a weird undertone.
It's not even an undertone, it's a subplot, if anything.
No, to be fair,
It's a full-blown subplot about how she fancies her uncle.
Yeah, it is. Like, I mean, she clearly fancies the hell off her uncle. And there's a scene a little bit later on where maybe the next day, actually, where she's out and she sees two of her friends.
Yes, the next morning.
They're clearly into him. Yeah, they're clearly into him, which is maybe a little bit more understandable for them because they're not related to him.
And her response to that is, "Oh, I just want to show you off to everyone."
Yeah, I mean, it's that's some creepy stuff. Even accounting for
Alfred, mate.
Even accounting for the fact that the 40s had some like pretty iffy sexual politics going on. This is wild. This is wild stuff.
Yeah, some of the stuff that was like cool in these films versus what wasn't is insane. Like, we're not that far removed from Mr. and Mrs. Smith, where it wasn't allowed to show a flushing
Yeah.
toilet. But it's cool to watch a husband beat up his wife, and in this case, a niece want to fuck her uncle.
It's so
What was censorship in the 40s? It makes no sense.
It's crazy stuff indeed. So the next morning, before we get to the scene where she wants to show her Uncle Charlie off to her friends, he's lying in bed and it looks like he's slept in. So Emma, his sister, mentions the fact that she wouldn't let her kids sleep until 10:30, but maybe because she hasn't seen him in a while, she's willing to let this slide for the time being. But she's just so happy to see him. But she brings him breakfast in bed and she tells him that a guy called Graham wants to do an interview with the family. And that there's another guy there with him as well. So this, coming back to the start of the film, where there's two guys who wanted to talk to him, wanted to try and suss what the hell was going on with this guy. This immediately again puts him at unease. He's unsure what the hell is, and he just refuses flat out to take part in this thing. So he says that he won't have his picture taken. He says he won't take part in the interview. He doesn't want anything to do with it. So again, we know that this guy by now is hiding something. But really, that should I think set off alarm bells for his sister, because why wouldn't he want to play along and take part in this thing? Why wouldn't he want his picture taken? Anyway, she doesn't really cop on to the fact that he's hiding something. So
she doesn't cop on to anything.
She doesn't cop on anything. Let's be honest. So yeah, that's then when we learn that Charles fractured his skull as a kid. Apparently he was like a quiet, bookish kid. Didn't get up to much mischief, but once he has this accident, he fractures his skull after he falls on an icy road on his bicycle. And after that then he starts getting to more and more mischief once he recovers from that. So again, apparently in real life, the real life person who the film is inspired by, Earl Leonard Nelson, and the Gorilla Man was his name, as I said. Apparently he had a similar incident as a kid, from what I can read online. And the internet's always true, let's be honest. But apparently he had a similar kind of incident as a kid where there was something happened in his childhood, and apparently people knew him after that, said that he just kind of switched. So again, Hitchcock drawing parallels, not even parallels, he's basically copying the backstory of this guy, but without actually making a film about this guy. That's again another indication that this is, for all intents and purposes, this is a film about the real life Gorilla Man, just by a different name or a different nickname. Hitchcock wants us to kind of believe that maybe this is the start of Uncle Charlie's kind of descent into moral degradation or degradation. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't even know what I'm looking for. Evil. Let's put it that way. Evil. So then we go to the bank, and as we said earlier, Charles wants to deposit 30 or 40 grand. He tells Joseph. There's a funny scene actually where he goes into the bank and little Charlie's with him, and he starts cracking all these jokes about the bank basically stealing people's money. And Joseph's not too amused by this. People are kind of looking at Uncle Charlie, but he kind of laughs it off and saying like, yeah, you know what you are, you know the bank kind of steals a lot from people. So it's a funny kind of scene, and anyone who has money with a bank, anyone who looks at their bank charges at the end of every month or every quarter, I think it's kind of similar kind of vibes. You can kind of understand where he's coming from there, let's put it that way. But yeah, he deposits 40 grand and he meets with a guy called Mr. Potter, who's the manager of the bank. And yeah, Mr. Potter's obviously delighted with the fact that Charles is depositing $40,000 in the bank. But then we see two women come in, two kind of older women. One of them is Mr. Potter's wife, but another one's called Mrs. Green. And Uncle Charles starts kind of flirting with her. Not flirting necessarily, but starts trying to butter her up. So it's a kind of another example of him foreshadowing, because the victims of the Merry Widow murder are all widows I should say, are all widows who kind of, the Merry Widow murderer, whoever he is, has wormed his way into their lives and he's taken their money and he's off them, basically. So maybe another example of Hitchcock foreshadowing there. So we come back to the house. Uncle Charles and Charlie are coming back to the house and they see the two guys. One of the men remarks, "Here he is," as they're approaching. So clearly they know who the hell this guy is, who Uncle Charlie is, or they think they know who he is anyway. So they go in, and it turns out that they're like an hour early, which again arouses Uncle Charlie's suspicion. But they go around the house, and Emma's not too pleased to find out that they're here an hour early. She wanted to get a lot of stuff done to make the family look a bit more presentable. Saunders starts to take some photographs of the house and of the piano and stuff like that. So they start to basically do the interview that they had prepared for. But Uncle Charlie gets out of Dodge. He doesn't want anything to do with it. So the two guys are kind of trying to. One of the guys is trying to gently kind of ask little Charlie, who's been accompanied. One of the guys is gently trying to ask Charlie, who's accompanying him around the house, kind of as his escort. Where's your uncle? Like, where is he? Where's that guy you kind of came to the house with? Because they clearly want to know where the hell he is.
Mm-hmm.
That's the real reason he's there. We obviously know. It's pretty obvious. It's not even Hitchcock trying to hide it. He's obviously the reason they're there. Jack Ryan basically says, he's trying to find some information on Uncle Charlie. So he bets Charlie that there's no one going to be in the room.
Yeah, he bets that Uncle Charlie's definitely not in the room. And she says, but I know he is.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, I bet you he's not. Because he wants to get in so that they can identify him. Because I'm pretty sure Graham and Saunders, they're the two guys at the start who were chasing Uncle Charlie back when we knew him as a different name through the streets. So these guys who are claiming to be a part of the National Public Survey and they're here to survey the average American family are very much not here for that. They're very much here to interview or get a picture or just get a look at Uncle Charlie. They get a picture of Uncle Charlie and Charlie's pissed. He's not happy one bit, actually.
Yeah, he demands the film roll back, so Saunders reluctantly gives it to him. But yeah, Charles clearly doesn't want his picture anywhere. So these guys, their plans to kind of find out any kind of information they have, whether it be a picture of Charlie or maybe any incriminating evidence in his bedroom, they're not quite able to get it looks like.
They do find out how to bake a cake, though.
They do find out how to bake a cake, which, yeah, that's good for them. Yeah, not to bury the lead, but Charlie and Jack Graham, they go out into town and he's basically wants to try and find out more information. But she quickly susses, as she has done throughout the film, she's quite perceptive. She quickly susses that he's a detective and that he's basically been hounding her for information about her uncle this whole time, so that's obviously the real reason they're in town. Charlie noticed the emerald ring, and so he's kind of wondering what the hell that's about. But yeah, essentially during a date, which is kind of weird, but yeah, I'm not too sure how you feel about that.
Only a 5-year age gap
in real life, or
between between the actors.
The actors, yeah. So I think she's 25.
During filming, he would have been 28 and she would have been 23.
Okay, right. Because I think she is a little bit.
Oh no, 24 actually. She's end of the year.
Okay, right. Because I think isn't she? Well, the impression I got at least is that she's meant to be late teens, maybe. I don't know. It's kind of.
Oh yeah, within the context of the film, yeah.
Definitely, but like it's kind of hard with these old films. Like attitudes back then were a little bit different, shall we say? But it's a bit weird.
Yeah,
it's a bit weird. Anyway, she susses out that Jack and Saunders are detectives. So yeah, she's not too happy about this development, and she doesn't really want to help them. But she agrees not to say anything to Uncle Charlie, and he promises not to arrest Uncle Charles in town if it comes to a point where they feel that they have the right guy and they want to arrest him. He promises not to do it in town as to not kind of embarrass the family. So he'll do it. He'll quietly kind of do it outside of town. So Charlie steals the newspaper article in Uncle Charlie's pocket when she gets home because she wants to know what the hell these guys are really after him. But it turns out there's not really any information, or else maybe he's already gotten rid of the most incriminating parts, so she doesn't know. She knows that's page 3 and 4, but she doesn't know what really is going on. So she legs it to the library before it closes at 9 o'clock. She nearly gets run over by traffic. The traffic warden's not too happy with her. But she eventually gets to the library, but it's closed, so she's banging on the door. The librarian comes out and she after much grumbling, she kind of lets her in and she says she has 3 minutes. So Charlie eventually ends up managing to find an article from that day's newspaper saying, "Where is the Merry Widow murderer?" From page 3 and 4. They're the pages that she knows were missing. She had copped that earlier on. So she knows that for whatever reason, her Uncle Charlie doesn't want the family to know that the Merry Widow murderer is on the loose. It's a bit weird. I mean, what surely, why would Uncle Charlie immediately think that they would connect him as being the Merry Widow murderer? Surely, like the whole by ripping a page out and burying evidence, it just makes him look more guilty. I know it's a bit weird.
Yeah, I think part of the reason of it is a pretty cool gender roles thing they've done with this family, where it's quite clear that little Charlie and Anne are by far the most intellectual people in the family.
That's true, yeah.
And being a literal, like, 8-year-old. I think it's pretty cool that this genius, playboy, gallivanting murderer with all this money is actually a bit of an idiot, and he just keeps getting caught. Like, he's so rash
That's true.
with so many of his decisions that like an actually intelligent serial killer wouldn't react in these ways. But I think the whole idea is he's actually nowhere near as smart as he thinks he is.
No, you're definitely right there, because like she would have found out anyway once the detectives came on the scene, because she found out pretty quickly that Jack Ryan was a detective. So the newspaper article maybe doesn't mean that much in totality, but yeah, it's a bit weird. Like, it's an early sign to her that he's clearly hiding something, where if he just leaves it in the newspaper, why the hell would anyone make that connection? But yeah,
the only connection is the engraving in her ring to the bottom of the newspaper.
That's maybe true.
But we're talking about a nationwide serial killer. Like, if we were to look into all of those things of like initials lining up, you know.
So it turns out that the Merry Widow murderer has killed 3 widows and taken off with their money, basically. So Charlie's like really upset with this reveal. She leaves in a daze, kind of feels like the ground's falling out beneath her. So it's a really sick shot then, where it's like an overhead shot, and we talked earlier about how there's not a ton of shadows and use of shadows in this film, but that's one really good example, I think. And again, coming back, some good cinematography here from Joseph Valentine in the sequence. So the next day she wakes in really early. She sleeps in, I should say, really late, which is unusual for her. But she tries to act normal. She tries to put on a brave face, and she tries to act like there's nothing really wrong. So she starts preparing dinner, and then at dinner she's dropping these little hints to Uncle Charlie to let him know that she's starting to cotton on to the fact that he's hiding something, and what it is exactly he's hiding. So cotton on to the fact that she knows that he's harbouring this deep dark secret. So she tells him about a dream that she had where she felt happy that he was leaving on a train, and because she's been so happy to see him up to this point, and because she's been talking about how telepathic of an understanding they have, he obviously knows there's something going on here, because she hasn't really reacted or acted like this towards him before. So yeah, she starts to drop little hints about the fact that she's onto him, basically. And then he goes into this really like massively sexist, misogynistic monologue about how basically women whose husbands have died and who just like eat and drink and waste all this money, how they don't really deserve to have all that good stuff happen to them. That basically little Charlie's looking stunned. Kind of the whole family's taken a bit aback because it seemingly comes out of nowhere. So it's the most overt example yet of his absolute hatred for women. Really, if you were looking at the modern day, you'd probably call him an incel. Really, that's probably one word you can call him. But yeah, back then that word didn't exist. So yeah, those are the really dark kind of opinions that he held. And yeah.
Yeah, the irony of that as well is that was his speech that he was going to say at the local women's club.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure that would have gone great.
He's not the
sure that would have gone down a treat with the women's club.
Yeah, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed, even though he's, to this point, we're led to believe he's getting away with murder at this point. Whether he actually turns out, watch the film. So Herbie then crashes dinner again, and Emma's like, she's grumbling because apparently this is a regular occurrence. He crashes the family's their meals, but he offers Joe a mushroom. Another funny scene where he basically saying that he he had put something in the mushroom that if it was like poison or something, Joe would be dead right now. So it's another example of the fact that these two guys are murder obsessed. Um,
Yeah, there's also that scene when they get back from the library and Herb and Joseph are at home, and Herb goes to Joseph, "Oh, how was your coffee earlier?" And Joseph goes, "Yeah, no, it was fine. Why?" And he goes, "Because I put soda in it. That soda could have been poison." So Herb's basically like trialing, murdering Joseph here. Herb, who also just like lets himself into their house whenever he wants as well.
yeah, these two guys are just murder obsessed, and it's another example of that. Really, them basically fantasizing about the best way to murder someone. So it's um, it's something that Hitchcock, as we said earlier, is, fantasizes about a lot in his filmography. But anyway, um, Charlie protests about this like sudden outburst from Uncle Charlie, and she leaves in a hurry. But he follows her and he drags her into a restaurant. We saw earlier a scene of him kind of being a bit forceful with her, but at that point she's really happy to see him. So she doesn't really clock the fact that he's holding her down really. But this time he drags her into a restaurant against her will. She sees an old school friend of hers who is the waitress there at the restaurant anyway. And this waitress spots the emerald ring and she's over the moon. She can't really believe how the hell this person that she went to school with, how she could afford such a thing. But she clocks on that her Uncle Charlie probably can. But anyway, Charles says that he knows that Jack Graham must have told little Charlie about him. So at this point, he basically all out confesses to the fact that he is the Merry Widow murderer. Doesn't try and deny it, doesn't try and pretend that maybe he got it wrong. He's basically just telling her that how the family reacted to found out, how to look upon the family, how to look upon the town. So he's basically just guilting her into trying not to say anything. So he confesses that he's done some pretty foolish things, and she puts the ring on the table. She doesn't want the ring anymore. So he gives a monologue about the state of the world, Uncle Charlie, about the greed and the excess and the violence, and yeah, it's kind of the biggest indication so far about the kind of person that he is, the kind of evil person that he is. And at this point, there's really not any doubt to little Charlie that her uncle's a murderer. He has committed these heinous, awful acts. He's basically at this point kind of imploring her to help him escape. He says that he'll get the electric chair if they get him, and he's talking about how the family will never recover. Her mother and his sister Emma will never recover. So he's just trying to guilt her into her silence, really. So the next day at church, she's clearly still she's all over the place. But at church, the two men, Saunders and Jack, they're standing outside and they get a little hand to get Charlie to come over and talk to them. So Charlie comes over, and Saunders, the photographer, he tells her that he actually kept the photograph from earlier on. He gave him a fake film. So they actually do have a photograph, and he basically says that he wants Charlie to get Uncle Charles to leave town ASAP, which is a bit weird to me. I mean, I know they promised Charlie that they wouldn't arrest him in town, but surely if she tells him that they're onto him, that he'll just escape. Like that's a bit weird. But anyway, couple of weird moments that don't fully add up. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I need to rewatch it. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, Graham's saying, "Yeah, I promised that we wouldn't arrest him in town.
Yeah.
So do the right thing. Ask him to get out of town, and we'll arrest him." But that just gives him an opportunity to evade them again.
Yeah.
100%. I
100%.
don't get it. If I was after a guy who the whole nation is trying to catch and he's a serial killer, I'm just breaking that promise and arresting him in that house right there and right then.
Yeah, it was weird. Like you can understand because of the promise they gave little Charlie that they would want to be honourable and follow their word. But yeah, it was a bit weird. I mean, she could easily just say, "Oh, by the way, they want you to meet you outside town and they'll arrest you then." Why wouldn't you just fuck off and escape again? It's so weird.
Yeah. Like promises are promises and all, but when there's like a literal serial killer
Yeah,
involved, I think you can kind of bend that promise a little.
yeah, it's not the smartest move really from Saunders, and maybe not the best storytelling beat. If we're being honest, it's a bit weird. I don't know why they'd expect the audience to understand why they would do that. But anyway, maybe we're making a bit too much of it. But anyway, she agrees to persuade Uncle Charlie to leave, but she won't set him up to be arrested. So, yeah, that's on them. They're gonna have to figure out a way around that. She tells them. So Charlie and Anne return home, but just then Herbie and Joe reveal that the Merry Widow murderer has been caught on the other side of the country. So little
What's left
Charlie,
of him?
what's left of him? Yeah, well, yeah, because it turns out that he had been killed. He was trying to escape, or he was running away from police at least, and he was trying to escape. And basically, the propeller of the wings made him into a chicken fry curry, if you want to call it that. He's in about 1 million different pieces now because of the propeller of the wings propellers.
Which, after watching the film, pretty heavy.
Yeah, pretty heavy. Yeah, so grisly end apparently it would seem for the person who was believed to be the Merry Widow murderer. So Uncle Charlie, he overhears this and he's just so chuffed, and he's really good acting here by Joseph Cotton. It's just really, he walks off really smugly, and he's just like, he believes that basically that's it. They're not going to bother him anymore. So he strolls back inside and he walks up the stairs, but then he stops. And then a sick shot, maybe in my opinion, the best scene of the film, or best shot I should say of the film.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely agree.
He turns around, and little Charlie standing on the bottom of the stairs, just outside at the kitchen door, sorry, at the front door, and it's like a downward shot. It's like an overhead shot where he's looking down towards her, and she's just staring up at him, and she knows
and
that
it's dead silent, dead
silent. Not a word is spoken. But he knows.
No music or anything.
Yeah, he knows because he went to the mistake of confessing to her the previous night. He knows that, there's still someone who knows that it's actually me. She's the one
This
person.
film came out in 2020. There would be a TikTok edit with the J. Cole song "She Knows" with this scene in the film. I'm telling you, if that's not been done yet, someone's gonna do that. We might even do it on our TikTok.
It's really
I probably won't. I'm not bothered, but we'll see.
If the inspiration takes hold. But yeah, it's a really sick shot. And yeah, in my opinion, probably the best shot of the film, like I said. And
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, little Charlie, he knows now. Little Charlie's the one person on earth, other than himself, who knows the true identity of the Merry Widow murderer is him. So he goes up the stairs and he sees Jack Graham talking about little Charlie, and he realizes that maybe there was some sort of plan in action to get him to confess or to get him to be arrested. But at this point, the Merry Widow murderer, so we think has been caught. So he's not too fussed about it, I would say. Jack Graham and little Charlie, they've shared a few scenes now where they've gotten a little bit closer, maybe I would say. Certainly a bit more trustful of each other. But he basically starts to smooth talk Charlie. And he all but confesses his undying love for her, which came out and...
Oh no, he does. He does confess his undying love at one point.
Well, he does actually, yeah. Not even all, but he definitely does. For me, it didn't really make any sense, to be honest with you. I know that they've laced a little couple of scenes where they've started to gain each other's trust slowly. But then it's a massive leap to let's spend the rest of our lives together, and for no, What did you think of that?
So far on the podcast, Hitchcock is 1 for 6 with romances.
Yeah, it's not as strong as you.
Those stats are abysmal. 1 for 6. And it was the first episode of the podcast.
Yeah,
so we've actually had 5 bad romances in a row.
Yeah, 100%. I know films back in the day, well, films even nowadays, but especially back in the day, they felt that people needed a hopeful romantic note to go to see it because they needed something to invest in as far as the characters go. But this is such a massive leap Hitchcock wants us to take.
Yeah, it's very forced.
Yeah, in my opinion, it just doesn't work at all. And this is where, we'll talk later about our ratings, this is where, for me, the film loses at least half a star, maybe even a full star. because it just didn't work for me. I don't know why it needed to be in there, and I didn't buy it, and that's not the kind of film it is.
So it doesn't suit the character either. She's an
No,
independent woman
yeah.
who needs a man. Well, actually, no. She rejects him, doesn't
She
she?
yeah, she does reject him. Yeah, she says no. In
Yeah.
fairness
Good
to
on
her.
her.
Good on her, yeah, and that's another example of how she's the most intelligent character in the film by distance. Really.
Yes. Strong character.
Strong character, definitely. So good for her. Yeah, she rejects him, but yeah, I don't know why. If she's got, especially if she's going to reject him, why even have it in there? Maybe it does serve to highlight the fact that she is an independent woman who's not just gonna jump at the first man. I'll give it that. But like, I just don't know why it needed to be in there. In that scene, they're standing in like the garage, and the garage door slams shut. But apparently, she makes a comment about how that's always happening, so she's not too worried about it. So anyway, they're not trapped in. They manage to get out after not a lot of pulling on the door. Really, they manage to get out. But Uncle Charlie's standing outside, and yeah, he's kind of. I think he's smoking a cigar. Am I right?
He normally is.
Yeah, he normally is. So
In most scenes.
my memory is that he's smoking a cigar. That might not be 100% accurate, but it doesn't really matter either way. But yeah, Jack tells him that he's kind of leaving now because it turns out that Jack is under the impression that the Merryweather murder has been caught, so he doesn't believe it's Uncle Charlie anymore. Obviously, Uncle Charlie's pretty happy to hear that he's going to be out of town. He's going to be leaving, so they shake hands and Jack goes, yeah, and he leaves town basically. So that's the last we'll see of Jack for a while, so to speak. So the next day, Charlie's going off to do an errand in the shops for her mum, and she's walking down the kind of the wooden steps outside the house, but she falls. Turns out there's like someone's been tampering with the steps, or something's happened to the steps at least. But we see Uncle Charlie kind of looking very shifty at the end of the steps. So it doesn't take a jump to figure out that he's done something. He orchestrated it so that little Charlie would fall down and maybe have a bad accident where she's incapacitated, or God forbid she dies. He wants something bad to happen to her to basically silence her, because he knows that she's the only one who can say for sure that he's the real Merryweather murderer. So then that night, Charlie and Uncle C, she asks him basically straight out to leave town, but he refuses. He doesn't want to leave anymore. He doesn't think anyone's after him. He sees no reason to leave. He says he wants to put down roots basically in Santa Rosa. Charlie's obviously distraught about this, but Uncle Charles is, he's pretty cocksure of himself at this point that he's gotten away with being a serial killer. Again, he threatens her by saying that the family would be ruined if she was to blab, if she was to reveal the truth. And he says that no one will believe her. So, yeah, it's another instance now of him kind of exerting his power and his dominance over her. He's trying to pressure her, guilt her into not saying anything. Maybe he's tried to harm her earlier, maybe not. But Charlie asks her mum for a ride in the car anyway, and they're going to this speech that he's basically giving a speech to like a women's club. Uncle Charles tries to get Charlie to ride in the car alone with him. She doesn't really want the family to know why, but she's kind of begging her mum to come in the car with them. So anyway, she goes out to the car in the garage, but the exhaust has been left on, so she doesn't really know what's going on. And then the garage door shuts. So it's pretty obvious at this point that Uncle Charlie is trying to fucking kill her. He hires the music up on the radio so that her screams won't be heard. He shuts the window so that no one can smell the gas or the exhaust from the garage. Yeah. So it's pretty obvious that he's trying to kill her. And it's only for the great intervention of Herbie, who manages to hear the fact that he's passing by, and he manages to hear the fact that someone's banging on the door of the garage to get out. That the family then jump to her rescue. Uncle Charlie acts the hero, and he grabs her and he carries her to safety. Puts her on the ground, but as soon as she wakes up, she basically tells him to go to hell because she knows what's going on. But her family, they think that Uncle Charlie's kind of a hero, and yeah, she's the one who knows the truth. She's the one who knows that he's just tried to kill her. Like, maybe for the second time, certainly for the first time. So everyone then goes to the speech, but little Charlie stays behind, and there's a few little quick scenes of her desperately trying to get in touch with Jack Rain by the phone or by telegram, but she's unsuccessful. He's not in reach. She goes upstairs and she's frantically searching in her bedroom, which obviously Uncle Charlie is staying in. She's trying to frantically search for something, anything that will kind of anything incriminating that will reveal the fact that will support her when she says that he's the Merryweather murderer, that he's the real culprit all along. But just as she's doing that, the family come back in. Everyone starts to come back in. As Mr. Potter from the bank is there. There's a few other people. So there's some sort of gathering going on downstairs. But she manages just about to find the emerald ring that Uncle Charlie had taken in the restaurant when she took it off. That's the thing that she knows now. That's something that. So yeah, she knows that that's something that is concrete proof for the police if and when she decides to reveal the truth. So she goes downstairs and Uncle Charlie is giving a speech about to everyone, but then he sees the ring on Charlie's finger. She doesn't try to hide it. She wants him to see it. So he knows that she's going to try and rumble him. She's going to try and reveal the truth. So out of nowhere, he says that he's leaving. He's leaving town. He's going to leave Santa Rosa. Everyone else is devastated to hear this news. Emma's kind of starts crying and she gives this heartfelt speech about what he means to her and about the fact that they haven't seen each other for so long and she'll miss him. But yeah, little Charlie's the only one really who knows. Yeah, she knows the truth, and he knows that she must be planning on revealing the truth to everyone, because why else go to the trouble of finding the ring that you'd hidden? So the next day, on the train platform, everyone says their goodbyes. Uncle Charlie tries to subtly get little Charlie to help him, so I think he asks her to bring his bags on the train or something to that effect. Yeah, he gets her to, basically as a way to get her on the train. We don't really know why at the moment, but he coerces her into getting on the train. So anyway, he goes on the train. We actually see one of the widow from earlier in the bank. They start to wave and there's a little sly grin comes across his mouth. So maybe she is his next intended victim or his next target.
Yeah.
But anyway, But anyway, little Charlie then, she's trying to leave, but Uncle Charlie grabs her forcefully again. He's waiting until the train starts to pick up steam. So clearly he's trying to, he wants to finish her for good. His previous 2 attempts weren't successful. He's determined now this is going to be when I kill her. I'm going to silence this last witness once and for all, and it will never be traced back to me, basically. It's going to be a tragic accident where she just happened to fall off a train.
Yeah, basically they're scuffling beside the door of the train, which is open. It looks like he's going to throw her out and murder her. She uses the frame of the door to kind of reposition her body in a way where she can push him out of the door. And as she pushes him out of the door of the train, we get the reveal that there is another train coming alongside this train on the tracks towards them. He falls out in front of the train in a great shot, I think.
Yeah,
I think if it was projection or a green screen, whatever they used, it worked. I think it looked really good. I don't think it was particularly obvious at all. And yeah, it's pretty harrowing. And then yeah, immediately after that we get the funeral. He's dead.
Yeah, the final scene. So Uncle Charlie has died from getting ploughed by a train. Yeah, surprise. How could he survive that? But turns out Jack Rain was at the funeral with Charlie, and yeah, she basically says that she knew more, but she couldn't tell him. And Jack says the world seems to go crazy every now and then, like Uncle Charlie. And that's the end, really. Yeah. That's the end. What did you make of this, Harry? What would you give it out of 5 stars?
The film, on a first watch, I gave it 4. I was really into it. I really liked the psychological thriller elements of it. Maybe because I hadn't seen as many Hitchcock films as I have now, but coming back on a rewatch, I tend to prefer films on a rewatch. This one I didn't. I gave it 3.5 out of 5, so still a high score, still a 7 out of 10 at the end of the day. It's it is a good film. I'd recommend it. It's a good thriller for the time. I think the way it deals with the gender roles is cool with little Charlie and Anne. I think they're a cool family dynamic for a 1940s thriller. I think Joseph Cotton is good as the smarmy, braggadocious serial killer. I think he plays it well. I just think, yeah, we talk about obviously remakes on the podcast and stuff before, and we have talked about them, but just talking about a film that maybe could be remade and it could work, I think, is this would be a good example of it. I think it's not necessarily Hitchcock's best. The weight that it has preceding it, like heading into it, you think this is going to be an all-timer from Hitchcock because, you know, it's all the Hitchcock fans seem to love it. It's Hitchcock's favorite Hitchcock film.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's upper mid-tier Hitchcock. I could name at least 10 Hitchcock films I preferred, but that's just me. I think it is a good film. I would recommend it. It's a good thriller for its time. And if I'm honest, I probably come across as if I'm being quite harsh. It's actually probably one of the best films we have covered on the podcast.
Yeah,
it's just for whatever reason, on a rewatch, I just didn't enjoy it as much. I wasn't as into it. But I still very much think that it is a very good thriller for the time. What did you think?
Yeah, I gave it 3.5 stars as well. It's the first time I've seen it, so I hadn't seen it before. I heard a lot about it, about Joseph Cott's performance, Teresa Wright's performance, about the fact that it was based on this kind of real guy this real serial killer. So I think the script is mostly good with a few moments. The romance angle should have gone, in my opinion, but we've spoken about that. The performances, like I said, are pretty good, but just think there's a few overly melodramatic moments, and the score doesn't fully work either. The score doesn't fully always make it more dramatic or suspenseful than it needs to be. Just a few outward dumb moments, like I said, about the love declaration scene and about the fact that he does some stupid stuff that would like leave some breadcrumbs, which he's not the most intelligent villain you've ever seen in your life. So I can understand why it has such a high reputation. Like, I did really like the film. 3.5 stars is, like I said, like Harry said, a good score to give. I'd say of the films we've covered so far, it's probably the second best film that we covered so far. Well, I wasn't on the last week's episode. Well, so you have the 40 Hitchcock films. I'd say only Rebecca is better for me. But I know there's 2 or 3 films coming later that I would even have above this. And then you're talking 50s and 60s and 30s. So it probably wouldn't break into my top 10 Hitchcock either, but it wouldn't be too far off either. I'd say it could easily be like 12, 13, mid-tier, upper mid-tier. So it's worth a watch if you like Joseph Cotton, or if you like Hitchcock, or if you like films based on true crime stories. There's a few funny moments in there, like we said. So it's definitely worth a watch. And 3.5 stars, which I think is a good film. Look, it is a good film. Just before we wrap up, Harry, do you want to touch on any films you've seen recently that kind of were particularly worth mentioning?
Yeah, sure. I reckon we'll probably do this every week. We might do it going forward. We might do it at the start, but this week we'll do it now. What have I watched recently? I watched a couple of Steve McQueen films because he was my actor of the month this month. I do a couple of little series on Letterboxd. One of them's Star of the Month, and this month was Steve McQueen. So this week I watched The Great Escape and I watched Papillon. 2 films where Steve McQueen, on multiple occasions, tries to escape a prison and keeps ending up in solitary and has a little short friend with a funny voice. But, you know, they're actually very different films. And I think I might actually prefer Papillon, which is wild to say. I'm not sure. Maybe I prefer The Great Escape. They're, like, very different, despite having such similar themes. I've also watched Errol Flynn's Robin Hood, The Adventures of Robin Hood, 1938. Banger, straight banger, great film. Couple of rewatches. I watched Pirates of the Caribbean for the first time in like 10 years.
Nice.
It's great film, great crack. What about you?
Yeah, so I actually had never seen any of the Mad Max films, believe it or not. So I watched those, and the original trilogy they're good to a point. I wasn't massively blown away with them. The second one's pretty good. The Road Warrior's pretty good, but I wasn't massively blown away with them. Then Fury Road hits, and I can understand the hype for that film. That's what the fucking action
Fury Road's a banger. Great film.
The action sequences are insane. Charlize Theron is insanely good. And in my opinion, probably maybe a little bit controversial to say, but I actually enjoyed Furiosa even more. I think it's even more, Have you seen Furiosa yet?
Nah, not yet.
Yeah, so I think it seems to have not divided people, because I think most people are broadly like, broadly seem to like it, definitely. But yeah, people are saying Fury Road is, which you can understand. I mean, Fury Road's one of the best action films of the 21st century, maybe ever. I honestly would like it. Maybe not quite as impressive action scenes. Although there's a couple of really good ones, but I just was grabbed by the story even more. I think Annie Taylor-Joy is really good. Chris Hemsworth is amazing as Dementus. So I watched the Mad Max films, including Fury Rosa. I also saw Otto Preminger's Anatomy of a Murder, which is a film that I've been wanting to watch for a while, and yeah, possibly my favourite Jimmy Stewart performance, which is wild to say because he's one of my favourite actors. It's top three at least, and I can say that without hesitation. Easily top three, and very possibly pushing for that number one spot. And I gave it 5 out of 5 stars because yeah, it lived up to the hype for me. It's very like there's certain films which you hear about hype wise, like Citizen Kane, 12 Angry Men, where you're like, is it really going to live up to the hype? But then it does. And Anatomy of a Murder for me is in that ballpark. I loved it. I loved the film. It's nearly 3 hours long, but it doesn't drag at all. There's not really any like action scenes or overly thriller scenes, and the case is fairly straightforward. So you wouldn't think that it would lend itself to being such a suspenseful, nearly 3 hour legal drama, but it really is, and it's mainly because of Jimmy Stewart's riveting performance. So yeah, those are the main ones that I've been watching. Anyone who wants to, by the way, watch or see what you've been watching lately, we'll talk about our letterboxds. They're going to be on the screen below, or you can find it in the comments and on the description of the episode. So yeah, all that stuff is available. Harry's better at this stuff than I am. But yeah, it's pretty obvious that all that stuff is kind of in the comments or in the description of the episode. So if you wanted to check out what we've been watching, or check out our social media or the social media of the Golden Hour Film Podcast, it's all on there. This is brought back to the 40s Hitchcock now for the time being. We've got a couple of announcements coming up soon as well. Harry can maybe talk about that next week in next week's episode if when he's feeling better, hopefully. But yeah, so I hope I haven't been too much of a drag listening to my voice. Maybe next week normal order can be restored, but yeah, hopefully I didn't do too shabby of a job. And
you carried the episode. Carried it.
So yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and thanks again for the comments. And I've been Shane Ronnie.
And I've been Harry Bailey.
Thanks very much, everyone.
See you next week.